Hello everyone, I'm Ruth Sauce Gomez, and today I'll be presenting about the issues on Indigenous Peoples Curriculum. The content of my presentation is a short background of the issue. I'll be specific. I'll be talking in Philippine setting and context. This is the issues in Indigenous Peoples Curriculum and the recommendations and suggestions from different literatures and curriculum experts on how to address the issue. Now, let's begin. So what are the indigenous peoples? According to Walker 2016, as mentioned by Ganal 2017, indigenous peoples are known to be as First Peoples, Aboriginal peoples, Native peoples, or ethnic groups who descended from and identified with the original inhabitants of the region. In the consolidated report by the Episcopal Commission on Indigenous Peoples, in Philippines, there are about 110 indigenous peoples communities numbering between 15 million to 20 million, wherein 30% is in Luzon, less than 10% is in Visayas, and more than 60% is in Mindanao. Since Philippines has a big number of indigenous peoples, the government through the Department of Education had developed a curriculum to cater the rights of these IP or indigenous people to have education. So let's talk to the most recent curriculum developed for IP learners or indigenous learners. This is the Indigenous Peoples Education Curriculum Framework. According to DepEd Order number 32 series of 2015, this curriculum framework is a pursuant to DepEd Order number 62 series of 2011 entitled Adapting Indigenous Peoples Education or IPED Policy Framework, DepEd Order number 43 series of 2013 entitled as Implementing Rules and Regulations of Republic Act number 100533, otherwise known as Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013. So this curriculum aims to provide guidance to schools and other education programs as they are engaged with indigenous communities in contextualizing the K-12 curriculum based on their respective educational and social context. Let's start with the first issue. It is something about the prejudice and discrimination. So this picture is from the slide of Anna Marie M. Sumoray. So I'll give some information about her listed findings here. So in the consolidated report by the Episcopal Commission on Indigenous Peoples, discrimination is being experienced in two ways. It could be from the people and from the education system itself. According to Ganal 2017, the UNESCO or the United Nations Scientific, Educational and Cultural Organization confirmed that millions of children are taught in the languages that they do not use or understand. So participation in designing curricula was limited, and education failed from eliminating prejudice and discrimination of indigenous peoples. And since these IP learners are taught in the languages that they do not use to understand, so they have encountered um, difficulties in comprehension. And the study of Adonis 2010, uh, as mentioned by Cornelio and De Castro 2016, for those at school, many encounter various forms of discrimination from the majority who reinforce stereotypes about them being backward, uncivilized, or ignorant. And because of these experiences, the IP learners had a hard time adjusting to these difficulties. So how to address issue number 1, that is about prejudice and discrimination. So the DepEd itself has its own way how to solve this issue. And DepEd Order number 32 series of 2015 says here that there is a need for teachers serving in indigenous communities to be adequately oriented and trained so that the indigenous cultures are appreciated and indigenous cultural practices and values are not discriminated as backward, inferior, invalid, or primitive. So, in some curriculum experts suggested that or also agree to this, that since teachers were not involved during the curriculum process, so therefore it must be communicated to them. Good communication is important. So supposing that the new program is a major change from the existing one, so we can communicate it through workshops, conferences, demonstrations, and the like. With regards to the use of language for instruction as one form of prejudice and discrimination, so the former DepEd Secretary Armen Luistro said that Dep DepEd values indigenous languages in the implementation of the mother tongue-based multilingual education or MTBMLE among indigenous learners in order to regenerate and enrich the community's indigenous knowledge systems and practices or IKSPS and indigenous learning systems or ILS. So this curriculum is designed to enable indigenous learners to be future culture bearers capable of exercising their right to self-determination as they interact with other cultures. Second issue is about the inaccessibility to education. In the study of Kalunsod 2013, as mentioned by Cornelio and De Castro 2016, there are about 5.1 million IP youths under 18 years old in the Philippines. And according to Armen Luistro, the former Secretary of the Department of Education, he said that this curriculum framework will benefit more than 1.19 million IP or indigenous peoples, students enrolled in the public schools, as well as learners enrolled in community and civil society organization run schools. Let's have a simple mathematics here. So 5.1 minus 1.19 million is 3.91 million. The question is, where are these 3.91 million IP youths? Not even half of 5.1 million. These 3.91 youths are supposed to be in school also. And so that's the issue. So no matter how beautiful and well planned the curriculum is, but if its content it cannot be experienced by most of the IP learners, then that's an issue. So according to the study, to the great extent, these statistics are not surprising. IP youths are considered one of the most vulnerable groups for living in remote areas and having very limited access to basic services, which include education. Why? So they are usually found in the mountainous areas of the country where basic social services like public schools and health centers are non-existent. So that is according to the consolidated report of the Episcopal Commission on Indigenous Peoples. To give you a little glimpse of how is it in reality, I'll show you a short clip which I've taken last December. It is where my sister was assigned to be a substitute teacher in one of our IP schools in our barangay in Oriental, Mindoro.
Dapat sila. Buhay ng teacher. I'm, um,
So after 1 hour of travel through motorcycle and you have to cross two rivers, and after that you have to walk about 35 minutes, depends upon your pacing, before you can reach that place. So how to address the issue about accessibility to education or to the curriculum? So in response to the Education for All program or the EFA, the DepEd through the Bureau of Alternative Learning Systems or BALS develop a curriculum designed to meet the learners' needs and preferences of indigenous peoples and marginalized learners. So the IP curriculum is implemented by the ALS group to IP learners, as mentioned by Ganal 2017. Actually, the DepEd also partnered with the different NGOs, people's organizations, and other religious organizations. So actually, it is true that implementing curriculum is quite challenging, but I know it will be attained through a step-by-step process. For sure, the DepEd continues to work for the improvement based on the results of their evaluation. The third issue is about the learning space and environment. According to the study, uh, there is a military conflict between the government forces and community insurgents in the countryside. Reports have been documented concerning schools being occupied by the military, exposing children to violence and leaving them traumatized. And because of this, it is safe to say that the schooling of these IP learners is affected. It has a psychological effect to them. So they may start thinking that the school is not as safe or not fun anymore. So they will stop going to school. So how to address the issue number 3, which is about the learning space and environment. According to the curriculum implementation handouts, it is believed that learning can only take place in a conducive environment. By conducive learning environment, we mean spacious and well-ventilated classrooms and seats. There should be no distraction of any kind or noise, no interference to disrupt the learning activities. A school environment where all these ingredients are found wanting, curriculum implementation will be hindered and the teacher in question will not be able to carry out his or her duties effectively and efficiently. In terms of learning facilities or other expenses that pertains to the improvement of the learning of these IP learners, actually the DepEd has allotted a budget for it. So it is based on DepEd Order number 22 series of 2016. This is one of the sample. Implementing on the allocation and utilization of the Indigenous Peoples Education or IPED program support fund for fiscal year 2016. So this is only means that money is also very important to make a curriculum successful. The fourth and last issue that I'll be presenting is about the relationship between the curriculum leaders and implementers. The DepEd recognizes necessity of partnership with different civil society and private sector organizations to achieve universal and equitable access to education among IP learners. As we can see, it is very helpful that there are so many organizations that help to implement this curriculum. But in the other side, it also creates conflict and misunderstanding. In the study of Alcadev 2013, as mentioned by Cornelio, and De Castro 2016, uh, the DepEd gave permit to operate some IP schools, but it resisted government control that the community leaders felt would threaten their community identity. They had, for another example, tensions with the Department of Education over following the standard school year and hiring nationally licensed teachers instead of their own trained teachers. The recommendations or suggestion how to address this issue number 4 is based on the study of Ganal 2017. So, she mentioned that curriculum delivery would be both school-based and community-based. Practice teaching may be done in territorial domains of IPs. The second part which I included here is a very good suggestion, not just for the issues that I have mentioned here, but also to the curriculum itself. Establishment of Indigenous Peoples Research Center to cater to students' intellectual, emotional, social, and moral needs may also be deliberated on. So this is a very good suggestion and I'm looking forward for it. So I have my personal suggestion about this curriculum. Upon reading so many issues, remember there's so many issues, but I only presented to you 4. So this suggestion of mine, I consulted it to my best friend who happens to work with IP learners in a public school. So I suggest that the colleges and universities will offer a course or subject to all education students about this Indigenous Peoples Curriculum. So they can title it as UIPEDC 031 or Understanding Indigenous Peoples Education Curriculum. I think this will be very helpful for every future teachers so that they can have an idea on how this curriculum works so that they can address or cater the needs of their future IP learners. I would like to end up my presentation with this quote. Education is a universal human right, essential to bridging gaps in human well-being, equity, and opportunity. Thank you for listening.